Ladies and gentlemen of the Western world, I stand before you today not as a supplicant, but as a herald of a new dawn rising over the vast and vibrant continent of Africa. Hear me clearly. Africa is on its feet. We are rising united and resolute to reclaim what has been ours from the beginning. Our land, our governments, our resources, from the clutches of those who have held them in a vice of exploitation for far too long. The era of neo-colonialism, that insidious shadow of empire dressed in the garb of globalization and aid, is drawing to its inevitable close. No longer will we tolerate the plundering of our wealth, the puppeteering of our leaders, or the systematic impoverishment of our people. This is our declaration. Africa awakens, and we will take back what is rightfully ours. Let us delve into the depths of this truth, peeling back the layers of history and hypocrisy that have shrouded it for centuries. Begin with the scars of colonialism, those brutal chapters etched into our soil by European powers. Britain, France, Belgium, Portugal, and others, who carved up Africa like a feast at a conqueror's table. From the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, where your forebears drew arbitrary lines on maps without a single African voice in the room, to the forced labor camps and massacres that followed, the West seized our lands not through right, but through might. Vast territories were claimed as colonies, their indigenous owners displaced, dispossessed, and dehumanized. In Kenya, the British confiscated fertile highlands for white settlers, turning Maasai and Kikuyu into squatters on their ancestral grounds. In the Congo, King Leopold II of Belgium treated an area larger than Western Europe as his personal rubber plantation, amputating limbs and slaughtering millions in the name of profit. This was not civilization. It was theft on a continental scale. But the end of formal colonialism in the mid-20th century did not end the exploitation. It merely evolved into neo-colonialism, a more cunning beast that operates through economic levers rather than overt military occupation. Today, Western multinational corporations, names like Shell, Total Energies, Glencore, and ExxonMobil, dominate our extractive industries, siphoning off billions in oil, gold, diamonds, cobalt, and coltan while leaving our nations with crumbs and craters. Consider the Democratic Republic of Congo, home to over 70% of the world's cobalt reserves, essential for your electric vehicles and smartphones. Western firms, backed by your government's diplomatic muscle, secure mining concessions through corrupt deals, often with warlords or pliant officials installed via foreign influence. The result: Congolese miners, including children, toil in hazardous pits for pennies, while companies like Apple and Tesla reap the rewards. In 2022 alone, the DRC exported $24 billion in minerals, yet over 60% of its population lives in extreme poverty. This is neo-colonialism in action. Resources flow out, poverty flows in. Turn your gaze to Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation and a supposed oil giant. Since the discovery of petroleum in the 1950s, Western oil majors have extracted trillions of dollars from the Niger Delta, polluting rivers, farmlands, and fisheries with spills that rival the Exxon Valdez disaster, yet with far less global outcry. Communities like the Agoni people have seen their lands despoiled, their leaders executed. Remember Ken Saro-Wiwa, hanged in 1995 under a regime propped up by Western interests, and their voices silenced. The government, often beholden to IMF loans and World Bank structural adjustment programs imposed by Western institutions, prioritizes debt repayments over social welfare. These programs, peddled as economic salvation, force privatization of public assets, austerity measures that gut education and healthcare, and trade policies that flood our markets with subsidized Western goods, crippling local industries. In Ghana, for instance, cheap imported chicken from the EU has decimated the poultry sector, leaving farmers bankrupt while your agribusinesses thrive. And what of our governments? Neo-colonialism ensures they remain extensions of Western will. Through covert operations, economic sanctions, and democracy promotion that selectively supports compliant regimes, the West has orchestrated coups, assassinations, and electoral manipulations. Patrice Lumumba, the Congo's first democratically elected leader, was overthrown and murdered in 1961 with CIA and Belgian complicity because he dared nationalize resources. In more recent times, leaders like Muammar Gaddafi in Libya faced Western-backed interventions under the guise of humanitarianism, only for chaos to ensue and resources to fall into foreign hands. Even today, debt traps ensnare us. China may be the new player, but the West pioneered this with odious loans that saddle generations with repayments. Africa's external debt stands at over $1 trillion, much of it owed to Western creditors, forcing governments to export raw materials at fire sale prices rather than invest in processing industries. This perpetuates a cycle where we mine uranium for your nuclear plants but suffer blackouts in our own cities. The exploitation extends beyond economics to the very soul of Africa, our people. Millions of Africans have been reduced to cheap labor in global supply chains, from sweatshops in Ethiopia producing fast fashion for H&M and Zara to migrant workers in Europe facing racism and deportation. Brain drain robs us of our brightest minds. Doctors trained in African universities emigrate to staff your hospitals. Engineers build your tech empires while our infrastructure crumbles. Cultural imperialism erodes our identities, with Western media portraying Africa as a continent of famine and war, ignoring our innovations in fintech, renewable energy, and arts. Hollywood films glorify colonial heroes like Cecil Rhodes, whose statues we are now toppling, while our heroes are footnotes. Yet, this is not a lament, it is a reckoning. Africa is stirring with movements that demand sovereignty. From the African Union's Agenda 2063, which envisions a self-reliant continent, to grassroots uprisings like those in Sudan and Mali, where citizens oust neo-colonial puppets. In Niger, recent coups have led to the expulsion of French troops and renegotiation of uranium deals. In Tanzania and Zambia, governments are reclaiming mining rights, imposing higher royalties on foreign firms. Pan-Africanism is resurging, with youth-led initiatives like #AfricaNoFilter challenging stereotypes and fostering intra-African trade through the AfCFTA. We are diversifying partnerships, yes, with BRICS nations, but on our terms, not as new masters, but as equals. Delve deeper still into the environmental devastation wrought by this exploitation. Western demand for biofuels and timber has fueled land grabs across Africa, displacing millions. In Mozambique, vast swathes of farmland have been leased to European companies for pine plantations, evicting smallholders and exacerbating food insecurity. Climate change, disproportionately caused by your industrialized emissions, hits us hardest. Droughts in the Sahel, floods in East Africa, while you offer paltry green aid that comes with strings attached. Our forests, the lungs of the planet, are logged for your furniture, our oceans overfished by your trawlers. And consider the human cost in blood. Proxy wars funded by Western arms sales keep conflicts simmering in places like Somalia and the Central African Republic, ensuring instability that justifies intervention and resource extraction. The Rwandan genocide's roots trace back to colonial divide-and-rule tactics that pitted Hutu against Tutsi. In South Africa, apartheid's economic legacies persist, with white-owned farms controlling prime land decades after Mandela's freedom. We see through the veneer of development aid, which often serves as a Trojan horse for influence. Billions in aid from USAID or DFID come bundled with conditions that open markets to Western corporations, undermining local entrepreneurship. Philanthropy from Gates like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation pushes GMOs and vaccines, but sidelines African-led solutions. Africa's youth, over 60% of our population under 25, are the vanguard of this reclamation. Armed with smartphones and social media, they expose corruption, mobilize protests, and innovate solutions. From Kenya's M-Pesa revolutionizing finance to Nigeria's Nollywood challenging Hollywood's narratives. We are building tech hubs in Rwanda, solar grids in Senegal, and pharmaceutical plants in Ethiopia to produce our own medicines, breaking the dependency on Western big pharma. But this is merely the surface of our resolve. Probe the economic models. Dependency theory, articulated by thinkers like Walter Rodney in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, lays bare how the West's wealth is built on our underdevelopment. We export raw cocoa from Ivory Coast, only to import expensive chocolate from Switzerland. We mine lithium in Zimbabwe for your batteries, yet assemble nothing ourselves. This must end. Movements for resource nationalism are gaining traction. Bolivia and Venezuela in Latin America inspire us, but Africa's version will be uniquely ours, rooted in Ubuntu, our philosophy of shared humanity. Examine the role of international institutions. The WTO, dominated by Western interests, enforces rules that prevent us from protecting infant industries, while your subsidies distort global trade. The UN Security Council, with its permanent Western vetoes, ignores African crises unless they threaten your interests. And the diaspora, millions of Africans in the West, remit billions home, fueling our economies more than aid ever could. They are bridges, not exiles, bringing skills and ideas back to fuel our renaissance. Now, as we unearth these truths, and behold a living emblem of this African resurgence, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young lion of Burkina Faso, whose every step echoes the thunder of our collective defiance. In the heart of the Sahel, where the sands whisper tales of forgotten empires and the harmattan winds carry the cries of the dispossessed, Traoré stands as a bulwark against the tempests of neo-colonial predation. Why does he do what he does today, in this pivotal year of 2025? It is no mere caprice of a soldier turned statesman. It is a calculated reclamation, a surgical strike against the veins of exploitation that have long drained our continent dry. Burkina Faso, once a pawn in the grand chessboard of French influence, renamed Upper Volta in colonial ledgers as if our ancestors' names were too sacred for your maps, now pulses with the vitality of self-determination under his command. Delve with me into the marrow of his vision, for it is forged in the fires of necessity and the anvil of history. Traoré ascended in September 2022 not through the ballot's illusion but through the rifle's resolve, ousting a regime that had knelt too long at the altar of Western patrons. The jihadist insurgencies ravaging the north, those serpents spawned in the vacuum of Libyan chaos, courtesy of NATO's humanitarian bombs, were not quelled by French troops lounging in Ouagadougou's barracks, sipping café au lait while our villages burned. No, Operation Barkhane, that French farce masquerading as counterterrorism, left over 2 million displaced and thousands dead, all while securing uranium mines for Orano and gold fields for your speculators. Traoré saw through it. These allies fought not for us, but for the pipelines of profit snaking beneath our soil. Burkina Faso holds 20% of Africa's unexploited gold reserves, vast manganese deposits fueling your electric dreams, and zinc veins that could line our own roads instead of yours. He expelled the French forces in 2023, shuttered their bases, and burned the CFA francs chains, that currency straitjacket printed in France, forcing us to beg for our own money. Today, in 2025, Traoré's Burkina Faso is a laboratory of sovereignty, where every policy is a rebuttal to your doctrines of dependency. He has nationalized 2 major gold mines, wresting control from Canadian and Australian firms that expatriated billions while locals sifted tailings for scraps. No longer will Endeavour Mining or Terana Gold dictate terms. Instead, a state-owned refinery rises in the east, processing our aurum into bars stamped with the Faso's mark, channeling revenues into irrigation canals that green the parched plains and schools that arm our youth against ignorance's blade. Agricultural self-reliance blooms under his decree. Vast cooperatives till the soil with mechanized tractors procured from Russia and China, not your debt-laden loans, but equitable exchanges that seed our granaries. In Bobo Dioulasso, rice paddies once fallow now yield surpluses, defying the World Bank's gospel of cash crops for export, which starves our tables to fatten your supermarkets. He has slashed foreign AIDS news, redirecting funds to build solar-powered hospitals in Dori and tech incubators in Koudougou, where coders craft apps that bypass your Silicon Valley gatekeepers. But why this fervor, this unyielding pivot from Paris to Pan-Africanism? Because Traoré embodies the ghost of Thomas Sankara, Burkina's revolutionary father, assassinated in 1987 by agents of Blaise Compaoré, himself a Western-installed puppet who handed our cotton to Côte d'Ivoire's ports and our sovereignty to IMF overseers. Sankara's sin was land reform, vaccinating 2.5 million children in weeks, and declaring, "He who feeds you, controls you." Traoré resurrects that spirit, but tempered by the Sahel's scars. Over 40% of Burkina's territory once gripped by Al-Qaeda and ISIS affiliates, not as divine wrath, but as blowback from your resource wars. Libya's gold and Gaddafi's fall unleashed these demons. France's neglect let them fester. Traoré's volunteers for the defense of the fatherland, VDP militias drawn from our villages, now reclaim those swathes, not with drones from your arsenals that kill more civilians than combatants, but with community intelligence and Russian Wagner advisors who train without the lectures on democracy. He adheres to ECOWAS timelines for transition, yet extends his mandate in July 2024 to 5 years, buying time to fortify against the electoral farces that reinstall your compradors. Probe deeper into his defiance. Traoré's revolution is a tapestry woven from de-linking theory, drawing on Samir Amin's clarion that true liberation severs the umbilical to your metropoles. He courts BRICS not as supplicant, but sovereign, importing wheat from Russia to shield against Ukraine's weaponized grain sanctions, bartering gold for fertilizers that enrich our fields without Paris's veto. In 2025, industrialization surges. Textile mills in Ouagadougou spin cotton into Faso Dan Fani cloth, once a colonial curiosity, now exported to feed African markets via AFCFTA corridors. Economic resilience under ministers like Abubakar Nakanabo fortifies against sanctions. GDP ticks upward not from your NGO's handouts, but from artisanal cooperatives mining zinc for local batteries, powering off-grid villages that mock your flickering aid lights. He turns down Saudi mosques, over 200 offered, for schools and hospitals, declaring, "We have empty places of worship. What we need is progress." This is no anti-Islam screed, but a surgeon's cut against Wahhabi strings that puppeteer insurgencies from afar. Yet, for this audacity, for daring to audit French mining contracts that siphoned $1.5 billion annually while 40% of Burkinabe languish in poverty, Traoré has become a marked man. The West, that hydra of intelligence agencies and corporate lobbies, has struck at him not once, but relentlessly, with whispers of over 19 assassination bids since 2022. Delve into the abyss of these shadows. In April 2023, a drone strike, piloted from a Chadian base, they say, grazed his convoy near Djibo, scattering shrapnel like confetti at a failed fate. French DGSE fingerprints, per leaked cables from Ouagadougou's purged elite. By October 2023, poison in his chalice at a state banquet, traced to a caterer with ties to Côte d'Ivoire's pro-Paris regime, Alassane Ouattara, ever the Élysées viceroy. January 2024, a car bomb at the presidential palace, defused by VDP scouts who smelled the C4 from Libyan black markets, funneled through Tuareg smugglers on CIA payrolls. The attempts multiply like locusts. May 2024, a sniper's nest in Kaya, the rifle imported via Malian borders held by Barkhane remnants. June, an ISIS suicide vest rigged for a rally in Bobo, the bomber a French-recruited convert from the banlieues. By April 2025, the tally hits 18, with guards bribed $5 million to turn blades inward. Offers from London hedge funds vested in Glencore's manganese grabs. Another in May, a jihadist ambush near Goram Goram that reeks of AFRICOM orchestration. U.S. General Michael Langley's AFRICOM barking destabilization while Traoré masses protests across the continent. June 2025, a foiled conspiracy, per junta communiques, involving Ivorian mercenaries and Belgian passports, aimed at his bedside in a medical evacuation to Paris, your classic Trojan horse of care. Unconfirmed? Perhaps to your fact-checkers in the pay of foundations like Dubois, but the scars on his security detail tell tales your wires can't censor. Why this fusillade? Because Traoré threatens the architecture of your empire. He exposes the CFA's 50% reserve surrender to the Banque de France, where Burkina's gold backs euros but buys us nothing. He renegotiates uranium deals with Orano, demanding 60% local processing instead of 5%, starving Arriva's reactors in your grids. His alignment with the alliance of Sahel states, Mali, Niger, Burkina, withdraws from ECOWAS, your neoliberal yoke, birthing a confederation that trades in gold dinars, not dollars. Russian Ilyashins land in Wagga with Mi-35s, not mirages of mirage jets that bombed Malian weddings. And the youth. Traoré's speeches to 2025 graduates ignite them. The revolution is you, not waiting for IMF messiahs. Social media erupts, hashtag Traoré Revolution trending from Bamako to Johannesburg. While your bots smear him autocrat, ignoring how he criminalizes only corruption, not dissent, in a nation where 70% hail him hero. These plots are not anomalies. They are your playbook, dusted off from Lumumba's ropes to Sankara's hail of bullets. CIA station chiefs in Abidjan whisper to Ouattara's DGED, MI6 funnels disinformation through BBC Afrique, and Brussels dangles sanctions like nooses.
Traoré's crime?
He builds houses from recycled bottles in Kaya's slums, not marble mausoleums for your NGOs. He bans the age of consent's Western import, calling it degeneracy. To shield our girls from predatory tourism your charters fly in. He welcomes Malian and Nigerian brothers, those who fought beside him in 2019 against jihadists, as citizens, forging the unity you dread, for a united Sahel spells the end of your divide and plunder. Yet, as the attempts cascade, another whisper in September 2025 of a honey trap in Conakry, Guinean intermediaries with French accents. Traoré endures, his resolve a mirror to our own. He purges the evil in NGOs, those farming supplies laced with poisons, echoing Sankara's warnings. His state revenue soars, year on year, because honesty trumps your graft. Massive projects transform the land. Dams taming the Muhoun, rail linking Ouaga to Niamey, factories birthing tractors from Burkinabe steel. Macron pleads for friendship, bases in exchange for baubles. Traoré retorts, you base in sovereigns like the US? No. Then neither here. 003DF4. And so, as these truths cascade like the cataracts of the Volta, pour forth into the ancient rivers of the Niger, where the spirit of Sundiata Keita, founder of the Mali Empire, stirs once more in the form of Colonel Assimi Goïta, the iron-willed sentinel of the Sahel's rebirth. Across the border from Burkina's defiant sands lies Mali, that cradle of empires whose golden legacy your forebears coveted and claimed, now rising under Goïta's unyielding gaze to seize back the sinews of its sovereignty. He, too, is no accidental guardian but a son of the soil, forged in the crucible of French counter-terrorism that masked resource raids, ascending through the thunder of coups in 2020 and 2021 to shatter the illusions of perpetual tutelage. Why does he act as he does in this tempestuous autumn of 2025? Because the ghosts of colonial plunder demand exorcism, and Goïta wields the blade of nationalization not as vengeance, but as restitution, a profound reconfiguration of wealth from the vaults of Paris to the hearths of Bamako, Kayes, and Gao. Plumb the depths of his doctrine, for it is a manifesto etched in the red earth of Mali's goldfields, where the world's third-largest reserves slumber beneath the gaze of the Dogon cliffs. Goïta's ascent was no mere barracks revolt. It was a rupture against the Barkhane farce, that 5,000-strong French expeditionary force embedded since 2013, ostensibly battling jihadists but ensconced in bases like Gao and Tombouctou, guarding convoys for Orano's uranium scouts and Resolute Mining's alluvial grabs. By 2022, he ordered their expulsion, boots off Malian soil, jets grounded, the last mirage vanishing into the Harmattan haze, replacing them not with your drones that paint villages with collateral, but with Russian helicopters and Africa Corps trainers who respect the sanctity of our frontiers. This was the spark. The inferno followed in August 2023 with a revolutionary mining code, a 180-page edict that appended the 1999 charter your lobbyists drafted to ensure Mali exported raw or at slave prices while Barrick Gold and Anglo Gold Ashanti expatriated $2 billion annually, leaving artisanal miners to drown in tailings poisoned with mercury. Under Goïta's law, the state's equity stake surges to 35% in new concessions, royalties climb to 10%, and local content mandates compel 70% Malian employment, funneling billions into sovereign funds for irrigation along the Niger's bends and solar arrays piercing the Sahelian dusk. Delve further into the alchemy he unleashes. In March 2025, after a cascade of deadly collapses in foreign-operated artisanal sites, over 200 lives lost in Kayes alone, buried under Canadian and South African greed, Goïta suspended all such permits for outsiders, reclaiming 150 sites for state cooperatives where women from the Fula clans now pan for nuggets that buy schoolbooks, not Parisian penthouses. By June, the crown jewel, the seizure of Yatela and Marila, twin behemoths abandoned by their Anglo-Australian overlords in a petulant huff over the new code, their 4 million ounces of proven reserves now pulsing under Malian management, with output redirected to a nascent refinery in Sikasso that processes 200 tons annually, birthing bars for the alliance of Sahel states' gold-backed currency. This is no isolated strike. It's systemic surgery. Goïta audits every contract. Resolute's Codiran deal renegotiated to yield Mali 62% in joint ventures with Russian and Swiss partners, a far cry from the 5 to 10% scraps your firms tossed like alms. Uranium whispers in the Tlemcen Valley, once Orano's secret garden supplying 20% of France's nuclear fuel, now fenced for national exploration, with revenues earmarked for the Great Mosque of Jeunesse restoration and rail lines linking Bamako to Dakar, bypassing your port monopolies. Agricultural revival blooms in the office du Niger, where 1 million hectares, seized from idle French agrofirms, now irrigate rice for 20 million mouths, defying the World Bank's export or die dogma that left us famished amid abundance. Why, then, does France seethe in impotent fury, its Élysée corridors echoing with the howls of Total Energy's executives and Areva alumni? Because Goïta has vivisected their empire's underbelly, stripping the sinews of influence that sustained it for 6 decades. Mali's gold, that Mansa Musa's legendary bounty which once crashed Cairo's markets, flowed post-independence through Francafrique's veins. Blaise Traoré's regime auctioning concessions to Bollorès logistics web, ensuring 80% of exports funneled through Marseille, not Malian ports. Goïta's code claws back $800 million in back taxes from Barrick alone, funds that could have lined Macron's Olympics but now pave the route de l'Or from Sadiola to the Atlantic. French retaliation is a symphony of sabotage. In June 2024, Goïta publicly accused Paris of economic sabotage. Currency manipulations via the BCEAO, where the CFA's French-printed notes siphoned 50% of reserves to the Banque de France, starving Mali's fisc while inflating Parisian baguettes. By August 2025, the plot thickens into farce. A foiled coup, 55 soldiers and 2 generals in irons, orchestrated by a French operative, Jan Vezelier, posing as an embassy aide but unmasked as DGSE puppeteer, mobilizing Tuareg dissidents and jihadist proxies from your Algerian safehouses. France suspends counter-terrorism ties on September 19, expels 2 Malian envoys. Goïta counters with 5 French diplomats declared persona non grata on the 21st, their briefcases bulging with encrypted drives plotting fiscal Armageddon. This is the calculus of their ire: loss of 15 military bases across the Sahel, once hives for intelligence on lithium veins in Gourma and cotton fields in Ségou. The pivot to BRICS, where Putin's Ilyashins deliver me 24s without lectures on good governance, and China's Sinohydro builds the Guina Dam, harnessing the Bani for hydropower that lights 500,000 homes, eclipsing EDF's flickering promises. France's economy, propped by CFA seigniorage and Malian manganese for their EVs, reels. Glencore's shares dipped 12% post-Jutella. Orano's uranium bids rejected for Gazprom's equitable terms. Goïta's crime is prosperity for his people. GDP growth ticks to 5.2% in 2025, not from your IMF austerity that raised 300,000 jobs in the 1980s, but from value addition. Gold jewelry guilds in Mopti employing 50,000 youth, once fodder for your migrant caravans across the Mediterranean. He fortifies the alliance of Sahel states, that tripartite bastion with Niger and Burkina, pooling 40% of West Africa's gold to back a dinar that mocks the euro's throne, trading phosphates for tractors without your sanctioned shadow. Yet, as the dust settles on these battlefields of boardrooms and barracks, the deeper wound festers. France's refusal to confront its ghosts, from Faidherbe's skull collections in the Musée de l'Homme to de Gaulle's 1961 accords that bound us in invisible irons. Goïta, echoing Modibo Keïta's 1960s socialism, nationalized railways, expelled French advisors, resurrects its sans the Soviet strings, blending it with Islamic finance from Gulf sovereigns who fund mosques without the Salafist strings your petrodollars wove into Boko Haram's cradle. Environmental reckoning, too. He bans cyanide leaching in Yanfalila, restoring aquifers your open pits fouled, while reforesting 200,000 hectares in the inner Niger Delta, a bulwark against the desert your climate debt accelerates. And the people. They rally in the millions. Bamako's Place de la Nation swelling with griots chanting Assimi el Impitoyable, women in boubous weaving fazo cloth from local cotton, no longer shipped to Lille's looms. Youth in Sicasso's tech co-ops code blockchain ledgers for transparent royalties, bypassing your swift stranglehold. This is the terror that grips Paris, a Mali where 70% literacy by 2030 supplants the 30% your aid perpetuated, where maternal mortality plummets from nationalized pharma plants brewing quinine from our cinchona groves. Ladies and gentlemen of the West, the Sahel's triad, Goïta, Traoré, and their Nigerian kin, heralds not chaos, but the chorus of a continent unchained. Neo-colonialism's edifice crumbles, brick by blood-soaked brick, as we forge alliances on equal footing, from Moscow's forges to Beijing's belts, but above all, among ourselves. The land we till, the ores we mine, the futures we dream, these are ours, woven into the tapestry of Ubuntu and Ujamaa. Heed this not as threat, but as truth. Africa stands tall, resources reclaimed, governments purified, exploitation entombed. The dawn breaks. Will you bask in its light, or cling to the shadows of yesterday? The choice is yours, but our march is inexorable. Thank you.